Hello everyone. I thought I would do Ravenflower's 2018 Witchy questions tag. I love listening to other people's, and I think it's actually a really lovely way of forming community to just hear how other people practice, and sometimes you can get ideas or just work out what sort of a person they are, things like that. So I think it's lovely. So question 1, what are 3 things you do every day to stay connected to your practice? So for me, it definitely changes seasonally, and depending on emotion, and mood and things like that. And also I think things get so woven into your life that you almost forget what you do. But one of those things would be, I sweep my kitchen floor every morning and clean the cooker. And whilst I do that, I sing to my spirits and to the ancestors. And it's usually a quiet time for me because I get up about 5. My son wakes often about 5:30, so I get that half an hour space to have that quiet time with them. Other things would be that often energy work, definitely almost always I will do some sort of reading based around it or learning. So that would be, perhaps, what am I looking at the moment? Palmistry would be one, herbal medicine I'm studying, different things like that, Celtic history, stuff like that. Often card readings. I always talk to my plants and so on, and would usually feel their energy whilst doing that. Those are probably the main ones that I do daily, I think, yeah. So when a spell or working fails, what steps do you take to try again or to fix it? Okay, well, I usually look back at what I actually asked for. So, was my wording correct and so on? Whether I used the wrong time of day, how I felt at the time. Because I do think often, actually, if we have had very disturbed sleep or we're feeling very down, it may not turn out exactly how we planned, or I don't perhaps put enough energy into it at those times, maybe. I may look at strengthening it if it seems to be waning, or perhaps doing a small ritual to boost it. So say if you performed a healing spell, I might do the first spell, but then if that seems to be waning a little bit, I would do sort of a second one to just reiterate it. I might look at whether it was actually a helpful thing to ask for, and whether perhaps a spirit or deity is intervening because it isn't good for me for whatever reason, or perhaps not good for someone I love. So I suppose you could see that as, for example, if I asked for financial prosperity, and I had a gambling problem, then I might need to look at the gambling problem before the financial prosperity pays off. And there may be some message within me not getting what I asked for, essentially. And I may also be blocking it by doing that. I look at whether there is something that has happened that is caused by the spells, but perhaps doesn't seem obvious. So when, for example, someone might ask for a job to fill their time, but not specify it was a paid job, and they may end up caring for a relative full-time, which is a job that fills their time, but it may not have been what they were looking for. But there are lots of other things as well on a smaller scale. I also look at the time scale. Did I even give a time scale? I would consult my spirits and my cards. I'd look at myself and see if I was in the right place or am in the right place. Have I let my energy wane? Am I physically unable to give that required amount of energy? And perhaps lastly, I would look at whether someone or something else could be interfering. You know, like, could it be another witch? But yeah, it would be the last thing I look at most often. I think if you work with spirits, they should be on the lookout for things like that anyway as well. Have you ever used an object or ingredient in a spell that would be considered odd or whimsical? I think anything can be used in a spell, and it depends so much on where you are in the world, because, you know, for me, certain things are going to be odd or whimsical because they're less available to me. I have used poetry as an ingredient. Not much more whimsical than that, is there? So yeah, poetry would be whimsical. For those I love, I have actually done books with quotes and poems in them that are imbibed with healing energy or confidence or things like that, where if they're feeling a certain feeling, they can look up the quote and it should help them to work through that feeling. Or, you know, if they're feeling nervous before a job interview, perhaps they might be able to look up a quote that makes them feel more self-confident and assured. That's probably an odd spell to some people if you're maybe starting out and you're still in the sort of, I need a full list: candles, cauldron, pig's heart, some nails, 7 dried herbs, picked at the right hour, on the right day, and, you know, I must be naked and have every other toenail painted green, that sort of stage. And don't worry if you're in that stage, because we have almost all been there, I think. But yeah, an odd spell for some might be a returning home spell I did using a cat hair, because it was just very, very simple, so it didn't involve any of that stuff. I was stuck in hospital in A&E. I'd left in a very dramatic manner. That was very frightening for my son. He was 2 at the time. I knew I needed to get home, and although it wasn't a very safe decision for me, and I might make a different decision now if I went back, I chose to do a quick spell by using a cat hair from one of my cats for my clothes as a big link to home, and those I love deeply, and you know, those I'm responsible for, and it worked. And I suppose it's a reminder to me that I don't need lots of bits and bobs, but just some energy and a cat hair. You don't even need the cat hair, do you? What techniques do you use to generate energy for spellcasting? Oh, this is so dependent. So I use dance, deep breathing, definitely voice and song. In some ways, the creation of a sphere or compass can generate energy. I use energy from other things, so I might draw energy from the sea, for example. I open to my deity and I'm given energy. I use Qigong exercises, which I find can be very helpful, and sometimes yoga too. I use visualization as well, often alongside those things to actually raise it. So, like, yeah, I would much more associate a physical feeling with energy. Although, saying that, it depends on the type of energy, doesn't it, I suppose? Yeah, I think those are the main ones. I think voice and so on is important to me, breath. How do you stay motivated to witch through things or even start a grimoire? I make it really simple, so I have a ring binder and I put things in there. I will sometimes write things down on my notes on my iPad or on a piece of paper, to add in later as well. You know, if I don't have time to write it up fully, I'll at least just say I've had a dream or something, just note it down. I don't have the time or energy otherwise to keep up with it, because I still struggle with illness. And I do hope in the future to write it all into a book for my son, which I'm sure I will. But I would prefer for now to just have that simple ring binder method. I don't like it because I am much more of a sort of romantic, gorgeous book type person, but it's just, it has to be really, unless I don't want to do it, you know. Now, on this topic, I get really confused about online references to grimoires, because I thought historically grimoires were enchanted, so like the book is essentially brought to life magically, given powers to make it come alive. Not as in Charmed, like as in talking real witchcraft, but I thought that, you know, they were essentially enchanted. Like, I'm pretty sure, I thought, do occult publishers like Scarlet Imprint not do actual grimoire type books, you know, work off that principle where some of them you can buy are enchanted themselves? I could be wrong there. I didn't think it was completely interchangeable with Book of Shadows, which is essentially what most people have, really. I mean, I think they like to call it a grimoire, maybe because it sounds more traditionally witchy, but I don't think it is a grimoire historically. But again, you know, I could be wrong. I mean, it's a difficult one, really. Yeah, I wouldn't call my book a grimoire because it's not imbibed with those sorts of powers. Hopefully, I mean, you know, it's a ring binder. But hopefully in the future, you know, I would like to, I'd love to leave a book to my son that was also enchanted. I think that would be fantastic. Are there times when you doubt your power or don't feel connected? I think everyone does. I think that it's often after these periods of doubt and confusion, and, you know, often you feel quite low in those periods. But I think after that, it can be that our biggest and most important lessons can occur. And I do witchy things every day, and I'm always a witch. But I think it's fine to take a step back from your craft, and certainly deep work in your craft, really. I'm a writer and a poet, but sometimes the words don't flow. And if I don't feel that connection with writing, and if the words aren't flowing, I don't force it. And it's the same with the craft. I always come back to being much more active, and I always learn a lesson. I don't ever give it up, you know, I never stop. But well, it's cyclic, isn't it? I think for me, I think it's cyclic. I mean, all women, well, all humans are cyclic, all creatures and beasts are cyclic, and plants, really. So I think, yeah, it's not something to worry about if you do need to just take some time. And I think that it can be scary in the moment, because you think, oh my god, am I ever going to get this back? You know, why am I suddenly not interested in it, or why do I suddenly not feel this connection? But I do think that often it is about, almost often I think it's that you've overworked yourself and you just need that time. And I also think sometimes it might be that, you know, maybe your spirits aren't wanting to work with you as much at that time, or perhaps you need that time and you haven't realised, and it's being given to you, you know, and you always do learn that lesson when you come back. And I think it's a natural thing for everything, you know, everything. Even as a parent, actually, you go through phases of just feeling more like, oh, you know, here we are, here's the routine again. And sometimes just having a few quiet days with your child can make a big difference. You know, a few days where you do some nice things that's outside of the routine, and just taking that time. So I really do think it's for everything. Yeah. How do you build community? Well, I mean, personally, I don't think that I do. I mean, I'm part of the YouTube community by making videos, and the online community with my blog and Twitter, Facebook accounts. But I haven't built a community. In theory, if I was to build a community, which I've thought about doing in the future, like I wouldn't ever do it now, but in the future, I think I would open a safe space for people to express without unfair judgment and with real conversation that was meaningful. As an overarching question, so if I'm taking that very non-personally, just as a general, how do you build community? I think you build it by creating a place where like-minded people can discuss and exchange experiences, opinion, and emotion. You would make sure it's accessible and findable to those who would enjoy it, and you keep it going by making sure it doesn't become polluted by false ideas and bitchiness, and looking at things sort of fairly within it. Yeah, I think that's really how. And I think the falling down of those things, being inaccessible, being polluted by false ideas and bitchiness, not having someone who makes sure people are looking at things fairly, I think those are where communities do fall down, really. How do you cope when life just becomes too much and you begin to lose faith in your practice, what you do, and who you are? There's a lot of things I have done in the past that have been very damaging to myself. Now I try and do things differently. I may spend time in the relationships I find supportive and less judgmental. These include humans, but also plants, spirits, animals. I journal a lot. I spend time thinking things through. A big thing for me is water cleansing. So I recently reached a point in my life with a very difficult decision before me, and I went to the sea. We just kind of dropped everything, went up there for a bit. I will often take baths to help as well. Rosemary helps cleanse me, and if I'm not doing spirit work, I might also use salt. Alternatively, I may withdraw from spirit work for a while and only continue feeding the spirits and so on that I already work with, but not actually doing sort of very deep work with them, if that makes sense. I spend time away from social media, which I think is important to recharge. I pray, I seek refuge in beautiful words, like poetry or books that I love. Yeah. Where and what is your favourite magical scenery? The sea, I think. It's like coming home for me. Even when I've been so numb and depressed that I struggle to find beauty in anything, the sea has awoken me. How do you handle new friendships with people who you don't know, or who don't know you practice the craft? Exactly the same as I handle any new friendships, really. So with any friendship, I get to know the person's likes, dislikes, what makes them comfortable, uncomfortable, and then avoid those things. If they're open to it, they may know. It all depends on them, really. If they're around my house, I might hide, obviously, witchy things, but I have to do that with some people I'm in a close relationship with. We call it the witch sweep. Saying this, I don't hide my personality, and I'm happy to talk about some interests that link to witchy stuff in the sense of, nature, healing, but I don't have to shout out about being a witch to do that. How do you deal with family that does not accept you being a witch? I accept it. I still share spiritual experiences with them, but I explain it through their lens and the way they look at life. Not everyone is at a point to accept witchcraft, and it has always been that way in the world. We are the outcasts and the outsiders, and that's okay. And yes, in some ways, it would be nice to share it, but what's the point of creating havoc and risking deeply upsetting someone when they're not ready to understand the full meaning? For me, it just feels unnecessary. I am a witch. I know I'm a witch, but I'm also a healer, a writer, a mum. Witch is only a term. Call me what you like. Yeah. I think there is a lot of talk about people almost not being accepted as their full or honest self. And I think that that is the case in some cases. And for some people, it is important to have your family accept it. But I think no one can ever see and comprehend our full entire self. And we are different for different people. You know, I think it's a bit like if you go to your grandmother's house and, you know, she doesn't like something you do, then usually you would just hide it out of respect, you know, not talk about it because there's other things to talk about. And I just think that's fine, you know. I think there are a lot of people who find it difficult that their authentic self is not accepted, but then won't accept other people's. And I think that's where a big issue really comes from. And I think we've got to understand that not everyone is going to accept it. And, you know, family can be very different. They just might not see things through the same lens. Have you ever had a spell backfire on you to the point it scared you so much you considered stopping practicing witchcraft? No. I did make some decisions that were dangerous to me when I was really unwell, and I did too much spirit work and journeying. I ended up nearly dying because it exacerbated my physical effects. It didn't put me off though, and make me not consider practicing, but it made me reevaluate myself and my own capabilities, and when it's sensible to take that step back, no matter how much I want to do something. When you first started practicing, when was the moment you stopped depending on others, books, websites for guidance and started following your own intuition? Or doing what feels right to you? Well, I've never followed dictated rules. I tried at the beginning, but I just found it was too stressful. I got too worked up about, like, oh my god, did I miss out the word the in this, you know? Or, you know, it says to me that I don't know, you know, like my robe should be this long and I've got it a quarter of a centimetre out or something. And I just think, yeah, that was when I was younger, a teenager. But I never, because of those couple of times that I tried, I just stopped doing it. And I did my own thing for a really long time. And then I finally found out about traditional witchcraft and thought, oh yeah, that fits more. So I'm more of a traditional witch now, but I still don't follow. I take things as more inspiration, if that makes sense. So I might read a spell, but then I would alter it to fit what I wanted or what I had, things like that. Yeah, most things I do just use as inspiration, and that's been since since I was a teenager. So like, God, I think I must have been like 13 when I started sort of trying things out. So it's been a long time. Like way over 10 years, I think, now. So, yeah, since I definitely just went down my own path. Do you wait for karma or do you take karma into your own hands? Firstly, I'd be careful of calling it karma, really, as I don't follow a Hindu or Buddhist path with those sorts of practices. However, it is a very situationally dependent thing. If someone is attacking my family or friends or home, then I defend and might attack back to protect. If someone's suffering a horrible illness but it's given me a wonderful friendship with them, then I try and heal them. I think, you know, witchcraft is essentially manipulating and influencing energy, which means all witches are taking what many call karma into their own hands. Because I'm sure that karma is much, much bigger than simply someone does something wrong and they get payback. You know, that's just payback, isn't it? It's not karma. But as far as I'm aware, much of actual karma in many situations is paid back in a following incarnation. And so in that way, I suppose I try and move forwards in my life to benefit myself and those I love, not only in this life, but in whatever lies ahead. I also do ancestral healing work, which goes backwards into the bloodlines past, for both the bloodlines past, here today, and those yet to come. Have you ever been psychically attacked by a fellow pagan? Not that I'm aware of. But I easily pick up energy from other people, and so I am careful to ensure I have strong boundaries and protections. Have you ever been accused of something that you didn't do because you practice witchcraft? No. I have had to explain multiple times that Wicca is not witchcraft, but no one has accused me of cursing someone or anything like that. I'm relatively careful whom I tell. I'm proud to be a witch, but I would rather not be exposed in some areas and with some people. People may have noticed that I've changed Facebook accounts on YouTube Pagans, which is essentially to protect my identity a little bit. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not so much an issue to me if some people know my name within the YouTube Pagan community, but I don't want my name being linked to it for several reasons. My first name's fine as well, but not everyone in my life knows of my craft. So, how do you feel about bringing diversity into your practice from other cultures outside of your own? I think it's a beautiful thing as long as it's done with respect and deep learning. I mean, if I was to use practices that were like Rudon or Umbanda, then I would prefer to be taught by someone who deeply knows that practice. I think you should understand the deeper meaning, cultural associations and history of what you're doing. And I think that's part of the difference in dabbling in witchcraft and practicing in witchcraft. I also think that you don't want to work so much with lots and lots of different practices that you lose sight of the relationship with the world around you, which I think can happen. Where you live and where you practice is important. Sometimes certain practices or belief systems become popular, for example, smudging. But without full knowledge of what this is, which may be hard to get appreciating where you live and whom you know, then it might not be appropriate to call what you do smudging. Like for me, there's a history of smoke cleansing in England and Ireland, which is what I do, you know, with what people would call a smudge stick. Herbs bound together and so on. I might also use smoke to send up prayers, but I try to refer to it as smoke cleansing just out of respect, really. Or, for example, the word shaman or shaman in relation to Native American practices, I've been told was forced upon them and would refer to someone as a medicine woman or man because of that. Chakras are another example where many people just don't understand the full system and haven't tried to look deeply into where and why it's used, the deeper meaning and history behind it. I think it can also lead to a confused practice where systems are not pulled together. And I think looking at our own path and what we do and what we're called to do is very important. So there's a difference in taking inspiration from a spell or method comparatively to just randomly using parts of a system which isn't fully understood. So if used appropriately, then yeah, I think it's wonderful, but only then. I do also want to highlight the fact that as a white, English woman and with an Irish background, I speak from a place where I'm incredibly privileged and I'm aware of that. And I don't think it's right, or it would be right for me to use practices that I have not looked into and am not doing with full awareness, because I think many people from that culture that I'm taking the practice from would be uncomfortable with it, because essentially my ancestors of blood did horrific things to them, and it's still very recent and they're still feeling the trauma from it. So I think it's very important for all of us to try and remember to be aware of that when we are, be aware of where you come from and how offensive it can be to other people, basically. But yeah, other than that, I think it's wonderful to incorporate different practices as long as it's done well, you know. What's your favourite witchy tool, physical item? Oh, 1 minute. Sorry about that interruption. So, what is your favourite witchy tool or physical item? I'm not good at choosing because I see too many benefits in different tools. I'm always weighing things up. But I love my Raven's Prophecy cards, my pendulum, Annabelle, my crystal ball, my knife, and pen and paper. Pen and paper is so important in my eyes because it's different to typing. It's really bringing something into physical reality. It can be used for spells, for poetry, for records, dedications, sorting out your head. You can communicate with spirits with it. You can map your stars with it. It's a truly wonderful tool. So I am going to go with pen and paper as my favourite physical tool. Right, it's been lovely speaking to you all, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Mwah. Bye, guys.